Hey class, welcome to another Sunday morning just out of bed video chat with Mr. Dow. Today I'm talking about the two stories that were assigned this week, Born of Man and Woman by Richard Matheson and Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. Both stories were assigned to illustrate something about the use of the literary element point of view. But before we talk about point of view, mention that both stories still are following the classic plot structure and the use of character details, which we talked about in the first weeks of the course. For example, in Poe's story, the basic conflict is sort of between your narrator and his sanity, or you could say it's between the idea he committed the crime, will he get away with that crime? I think, the tension goes up through the story up to the point to the very end when we realize that his crushing sense of guilt is going to end up giving him away. In the other story by Richard Matheson, your conflict there, the basic conflict is this child or whatever this thing is that's living in the cellar really wants to get out, wants to experience life in some way, and the family really wants to keep him down there, this shameful secret. And his attempts to get out get worse and worse until the very end we realize, oh, he can take the chain out of the wall. This kid is going to get out. And so that's a logical place to have a climax of the story at the end. So they both follow plot structure. They both also, like I said, have character detail. In the Poe story, you get this detail of the way the guy speaks, the way he constantly second-guesses himself and hesitates and laughs at nothing. And those are just classic literary signs of mental illness. And I would say Poe really kind of invented that. Other people have ripped it off from him. But that small detail tells me throughout the whole story there's something wrong with this guy. With the child narrator in Born of Man and Woman, you get it's the use of language again. These great details, these words that the narrator uses for things like rain and little boy or little girl tells me this child thing has never been outside. He doesn't know anything about the real world out there. He also slips little details he goes through that tells you something about his physical condition. But in our class we're more interested in the psychology, and we can tell from his innocence and his simple desires to be with other people that he is childlike. This is we learn in the story he's 8 years old, but that's part of his character. But more importantly, we're talking about point of view in this week. Who's telling the story, and how does that choice of who's telling the story kind of affect the story? Here we have two stories in first-person narration, which means the character in the story is actually telling us his experiences as they happen. The advantages of doing this for the writer are that we have immediate involvement for the reader. Right, you're into the story right away. You don't have you're part of the story immediately because you're with that character. You also get to know the character's thoughts and feelings, which we don't always get in every single point of view. For example, Most Dangerous Game, I know what Rainsford was thinking, and sometimes I knew what he was feeling, but I never knew what Zaroff was thinking or feeling, and that was a specific choice of the point of view. First-person point of view, I am with that character, I get it. And even if the character is an unpleasant person, as is the narrator in The Telltale Heart, that character is still my protagonist. My dog's here now, see, he's making sure I do this right. Beyond that, though, the most interesting thing about the use of first person here is that we are kind of stuck with the narrator's worldview. And if the writers created a narrator who is struggling with sanity, like Poe did with Telltale Heart, we're getting a worldview that we can't necessarily trust. In this case, the idea that there's something wrong with the guy is hinted at, and actually as he goes through the murder, most readers are going to figure out, oh yeah, there's something wrong with this guy, so that we should actually reevaluate the things he tells us early on in the story. He builds up a grudge against the old man, but we never have evidence. There's no evidence outside his own perspective that the old man ever did anything to him. So really, and this is just more evidence that he actually is crazy, and you have to go back and re-examine to say, no, that's part of the craziness, that he killed this old man for no reason at all, for his own weird fixation on the old man's eye. With the Richard Matheson story, because the narrator is a child, completely inexperienced with the world, we have to go through and we have to kind of interpret what's going on, even as this narrator describes it. He doesn't know what rain is, and so we have to say, oh, that I get it. You have to kind of think of what it is. Also, that the use of him as a first-person narrator does a weird thing for the reader's sympathies. Normally we have a tendency to be with the first-person narrator, and I feel sorry for this child who was locked in a basement through no fault of his own, just because of the way he was born. But as the story goes on and you start realizing, ooh, this child thing is pretty horrible, physically must be pretty weird. It's like multiple legs scrabbling across the ceiling, dripping green. It's a terrible, monstrous thing. And also, he's starting to get angry, and then he's very strong. And you start sensing, oh, there's a threat here also from the narrator. But he is a child, and that's his feelings are understandable. So I would say the use of first-person narration does a lot in both of those stories to kind of affect the way the story is told and the meaning I get from it. Okay, so that's all I want to say this week, and I will see you next time. Bye.